There is a number nobody in Las Vegas, Phoenix, or Los Angeles wants to say out loud: 895 feet. That is the elevation engineers call dead pool, the point where Lake Mead can no longer push water through Hoover Dam by gravity alone. No flow, no power, no supply for 25 million people across 7 states. In the summer of 2022, the lake fell to roughly 1,040 feet, the lowest level since it was first filled in the 1930s, closer to dead pool than at any point in its 90-year history. It has recovered slightly since then. Good snowpack pushed the surface back up. If you only watch the headlines, you might think the emergency is past. But the number underneath that recovery hasn't moved. And that number is the real story. Drive out from Las Vegas on Highway 93 and look down into Black Canyon. The first thing you see is a white line running along both canyon walls, end to end. A bathtub ring. Mineral stains left behind as the water retreated, a chalk white scar taller than a 10-story building, visible from orbit and from the strip on a clear day. At full pool, Lake Mead holds roughly 26 million acre-feet, enough water to keep 2 average American homes running for over 300,000 years combined. Full elevation, 1,221 feet. Today, even after 2 decent snow seasons, the lake sits near 1,070 to 1,080 feet, about 140 feet below where engineers built it to run. A reservoir designed to hold 9 years of Colorado River flow now holds closer to 2. This isn't a drought story. A drought ends. This gap has been growing for over 100 years. In November 1922, delegates from 7 states signed the Colorado River Compact at a lodge in Santa Fe, dividing 16.5 million acre-feet of water a year among Arizona, California, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. Here is the detail that changes everything. The flow data they used came from one of the wettest stretches in the river's recorded history. Tree ring studies spanning more than 1,000 years compiled by climate researchers put the river's real long-term average closer to 12 to 13 million acre-feet a year. Some years, less than 10. The compact promised roughly a quarter more water than the river has ever reliably carried. Some scientists at the table suspected it at the time. They were overruled. 7 states had finally agreed on something, and nobody wanted to reopen the deal for smaller numbers. From the first signature, the Southwest was spending water that did not exist. For decades, it didn't matter. Lake Mead and Lake Powell acted like a savings account, built up during those unusually wet early years, covering the annual shortfall. 1935, Hoover Dam completed, 2 years ahead of schedule. 1922-1990 states draw down more than the river supplies, cushioned by reservoir reserves. 2022, a historic dry stretch, drains the cushion year after year. July 2022, Lake Mead bottoms out near 1,040 feet, its lowest level ever. 2022-2023, heavy Sierra and Rocky Mountain snowpack lifts the lake 30 to 40 feet. Today, the lake sits roughly 140 feet below full, and the underlying deficit remains unchanged. Every stage looks like a separate event. Together, they trace one continuous decline. Hoover Dam makes electricity using hydraulic head the vertical distance between the lake surface and the turbines at the base of the dam. Water drops through intake towers and slams into the turbines below. The higher the lake, the harder the impact, the more power produced. At full pool, the dam can generate roughly 2,080 megawatts, enough for about 1.3 million homes. But every foot the lake loses weakens that impact. At the 2022 low point, output had fallen by an estimated 25 to 40%. Engineers installed emergency low-water turbines, smaller units designed to function with reduced pressure, just to keep the plant producing anything at all. One of the most productive power stations in the country is now running on backup equipment. The visible drop in Lake Mead is only a symptom. Underneath it sits a much larger machine, the entire Colorado River storage system, stretching from the Rocky Mountain snowpack through Lake Powell, through Glen Canyon Dam, into Lake Mead, and out through hundreds of miles of aqueducts and canals. In 2022, Lake Powell, the second largest reservoir in the country, dropped so low that the federal government made emergency releases from Flaming Gorge Reservoir in Wyoming, more than 400 miles upstream, just to keep Glen Canyon Dam above its own minimum power threshold. 2 of the largest man-made lakes in America were both approaching failure at the same time. Water was being moved from one shrinking system to prop up another. This is not one dam in trouble. It is an entire interconnected network running on a deficit that dates back a century. The Southwest has been warned before through the water itself. As Lake Mead's surface pulled back, it exposed things buried for decades. In May 2022, human remains inside a rusted barrel surfaced at Hemingway Harbor. More remains followed nearby, some believed to date to the 1970s or 1980s. Around the same time, a World War II-era landing craft, submerged for nearly 80 years, rose out of the mud near the Overton Arm. Beyond the individual discoveries, tree ring records reaching back more than 1,000 years show the current dry stretch gripping the river basin as the most severe extended drought in that entire span, a scale of scarcity not seen since roughly the 800s. History did not just predict this moment. Physical evidence from history is now surfacing to confirm it. Local in Pinal County, Arizona, farming families lost water rights almost overnight when the first federal shortage was declared in 2022. Fields that grew cotton and alfalfa for generations now sit as cracked, dry earth. Regional, the Central Arizona Project moves Colorado River water 336 miles across open desert. When supply drops, the lowest priority users, often tribal communities and smaller agricultural districts, are cut first. National, California's Imperial Valley, watered almost entirely by the Colorado River, grows roughly 2/3 of America's winter vegetables. A cut here does not stay in the desert, it shows up as higher grocery prices from Ohio to Maine. System-wide, the Colorado River, which carved the Grand Canyon over 6 million years, no longer reliably reaches the Sea of Cortez. For most of the last 25 years, it dries up in the desert before crossing into Mexico, despite a 1944 treaty guaranteeing Mexico 1.5 million acre-feet annually. Each layer widens the crisis. What starts as a lake level becomes a food system, an international treaty, and a vanished river mouth. The current interim guidelines governing how shortages are shared expire in 2026. What replaces them is still unresolved. Will 7 states agree on permanent cuts before the reservoirs hit critical levels again? What happens to Hoover Dam's power output if the lake drops toward Deadpool a second time? Can any negotiated deal change how much water the river actually carries? How many more good snow years can mask a structural deficit that has existed since 1922? Nobody currently has a confirmed answer. Hoover Dam itself isn't going anywhere. 5 million cubic yards of concrete anchored into volcanic rock built to outlast the country that made it. But a dam without water behind it is a monument, not a resource. Lake Mead sits roughly 140 feet below where it was designed to operate. The turbines are running on emergency equipment, downstream farms are running on less. The river no longer reliably reaches the sea. A few strong winters can slow the decline. None of them can erase a gap that has been widening for over a century. 25 million people are not waiting for rain anymore. They're waiting for 7 state governments to agree on who gets less, and in over 100 years, no one has volunteered to go first. The white ring on the canyon wall keeps climbing, 1 foot at a time, closer to 895. If you want to understand what happens when that line is finally reached, subscribe, because this story isn't finished.